My wife is paying for her secret boyfriend to live in our rental property. It's funny, the things that stick with you. For me, it's the smell of stale beer and regret, clinging to the worn leather of my armchair like a second skin. I'm sitting here now. Same chair, same smell, but the regret, that's a whole new level. If you're finding your way here, maybe because you clicked on something that seemed too wild to be true, or maybe you just stumbled in, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, and while you're at it, drop a like. Share this with anyone you think might understand, and leave a comment. Seriously, I could use the feedback. Because right now, I'm drowning in my own story, and I don't know how much longer I can tread water. It started, like most disasters, with a subtle shift. Nothing you could point to, nothing concrete, just a feeling. You know that feeling? Like the air in your house gets a little thicker, the silence a little too loud. I've been married to Sarah for 12 years. 12 years. We'd built this life from the ground up. A little starter house in the suburbs, chipped paint and overgrown bushes, but ours. Then came the promotion, the move to a slightly bigger place, and eventually the rental property. It was a nice little bungalow, 2 bedrooms, a decent yard. Sarah had always been good with houses. She'd scouted it, negotiated the deal, handled the minor renovations herself. She was proud of it. I was proud of her. We were a team, you know? That's what you tell yourself. That's what you build a life on. She'd handled the renters too. Found a quiet couple, a teacher and her husband, moved in about 6 months ago. Paid on time, kept the place tidy, no issues. Then, about 3 months ago, she started mentioning a project. She was vague, as she often was when she was onto something that excited her. Just a little side hustle, she'd say, her eyes sparkling a way they hadn't in a while. Something that could be really good for us. I figured, great, more money, less stress. That was always the dream, right? Financial security, being able to relax, travel, maybe finally fix up that goddamn shed in the backyard that's been leaning like the Tower of Pisa since we bought this place. She'd spend hours on her laptop, hunched over the kitchen table, a frown of concentration etched onto her face. I'd peek over her shoulder sometimes, see spreadsheets and graphs, what looked like investment portfolios. I'd ask her what she was working on, and she'd wave me away, a playful, dismissive gesture. Just crunching numbers, honey. Don't worry about it. It's all handled. And I'd let it go. Why wouldn't I? She was always so driven, so capable. She was the one who managed our finances, who kept us afloat when I was between gigs. I trusted her, implicitly. That's the real killer, isn't it? The implicit trust. The foundation you think is solid bedrock, only to find out it's built on quicksand.
The first real crack, though, wasn't about money. It was about time. Sarah was always busy, always had something going on. But lately, her busy had taken on a new dimension. Late nights at the office, which was unusual. She was a graphic designer, and her work was mostly freelance, done from home. She said she was taking on a big project, a client with demanding deadlines. Okay. Then it was weekend trips, networking events, she called them, industry conferences. I bought it. I wanted to buy it, because the alternative was too ugly to contemplate. One Tuesday evening, I was making dinner. Sarah was supposed to be at a late meeting. The house was quiet, too quiet. I was chopping onions, tears streaming down my face, a familiar domestic scene. The phone rang. It was Sarah. Her voice was tight, a little breathless. "Hey baby, listen, my meeting ran super late. I'm going to be here for a while. Don't wait up for me. Go ahead and eat without me. Love you." Standard stuff. Except the background noise. It wasn't the usual hum of a city street or the muffled sounds of an office building. It was softer, more residential. And there was music. Not the kind of generic instrumental music you hear in corporate waiting rooms. It was indie rock, something with a driving beat. I hung up, a knot tightening in my stomach. It was stupid. Why would I question it? She was working. She was stressed. Maybe she'd taken a call in her car, parked somewhere quiet to concentrate. That's what I told myself. But the feeling lingered, that thick, heavy air. The next morning, she was tired but chipper. She kissed me goodbye, her lips brushing my cheek. "Big day today," she'd said. And I watched her go, a little tremor of unease still vibrating beneath the surface. The rental property. It was always in the back of my mind. Sarah had mentioned it a few times, offhand. Just checking in on the place, she'd say, making sure the tenants are happy. I assumed she was using her downtime for that. But then she started leaving earlier on those days and coming back later. And she'd be different. A little too bright, a little too eager to please. It was like she was trying to overcompensate for something. One Saturday, I decided to surprise her. I knew she was going to the rental property. I figured I'd bring her lunch, maybe help with some yard work. I drove over, a bag of her favorite deli sandwiches in the passenger seat. As I got closer, I saw her car parked out front. That was normal. But then I noticed another car, a beat-up cherry red Subaru. Not the kind of car you'd expect to see a tenant driving, and definitely not the kind of car Sarah would ever own. It looked like a struggling artist's car, or a college student's car, something that screamed low budget. I parked down the street, my heart thudding against my ribs like a tapped bird. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to pretend I hadn't seen it, but I couldn't.
I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my feet, each step amplifying the sickening dread. The front door was unlocked. Sarah was usually meticulous about that. I pushed it open, calling out, "Hey honey, surprise!" The living room was empty, but the smell hit me first. Not the usual scent of lemon polish and home. It was a mix. Cheap cologne, stale cigarette smoke, and something vaguely floral, like air freshener trying to mask something unpleasant. And the music was there again, faint but definitely the same indie rock. I walked further into the house, calling her name again, my voice tighter now. "Sarah, where are you?" I peeked into the kitchen. Empty. The bathroom? Empty. And then I heard it. Laughter. Not Sarah's light, tinkling laughter. This was deeper, rougher, coming from the back bedroom, the one who wasn't supposed to be occupied by the current tenants who lived in the front too. My blood ran cold. I've always been a calm guy, level-headed, but in that moment, a primal instinct took over. I moved towards the sound, each footstep deliberate, heavy. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I could see a sliver of light, hear the murmur of voices. I pushed the door open, and then I saw him. He was younger than me, maybe late 20s, early 30s, wiry, with a mop of unruly dark hair and a faded band t-shirt. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to me, laughing at something Sarah was saying. She was facing him, her back to the door, her shoulders shaking with silent laughter. She looked radiant, the way she used to look when we first met, the way she hadn't looked in years. He turned then, his laughter dying on his lips as he saw me. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, widened in alarm. Sarah froze, her smile vanishing, replaced by a look of pure terror. Her face went ashen. She scrambled to her feet, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mark?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The guy on the bed just stared, his mouth slightly agape. The room was silent, save for the faint thumping of my own heart, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, suffocating stillness. I looked from him to her, my mind a complete blank. There were no words, no explanations, just the stark, undeniable reality of what I was seeing. Him, her, this room, the smell, the music, the fact that she was paying for this person, to live in our rental property. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just stood there, in the doorway, a ghost in my own life, staring at the wreckage of my marriage. Sarah's eyes were wide, pleading, but there was something else there too, a flicker of defiance, of shame, of something I couldn't quite decipher. The red Subaru sat outside, a silent testament to the secret life she'd been building, brick by brick, lie by lie. And I, the oblivious architect of our shared past, had just stumbled into its foundation. The air was thick, not with regret this time, but with a chilling, absolute certainty. It wasn't just a crack. It was a chasm, and I was standing on the edge, about to fall. It felt like an eternity before anyone moved, before the sound of my own ragged breathing was broken by anything else. Sarah finally broke the spell, her voice a thin, reedy thing.
Mark, I can explain. Explain? What the hell could she possibly explain? The guy was still on the bed, looking like a deer caught in headlights, but with a definite undertone of, well, not exactly panic, more like annoyed inconvenience, if I'm being honest. Like I'd just walked in on him mid-Netflix binge. And Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I'd built a life with, was just there, frozen. Her face pale, her eyes darting between me and this stranger. The stranger finally moved. He stood up, stretching his lanky frame. He was taller than I'd first thought, but still looked like he hadn't eaten a decent meal in a week. His band t-shirt had a faded logo I didn't recognize, and his jeans were ripped at the knee. He looked like he belonged on a street corner, busking for change, not in my rental property, laughing with my wife. He ran a hand through his already messy hair and gave me a look that was equal parts wary and arrogant. "Who the hell are you?" he finally asked, his voice a low growl. The question hung in the air, absurd. Who the hell was he, and who the hell was she to have him here? I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. It was like my vocal cords had seized up, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck, a mix of shame and pure, unadulterated rage. Shame because I had been so blind, so stupid. Rage because he was here in my house with my wife. Sarah stepped forward, her hands held out like she was warding off an attack. "This is Mark Ethan, my husband." She turned to me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Mark, this is Ethan. He's the musician I was telling you about, the one I'm helping out." Helping out. That was it. That was her explanation. She was helping out this vagabond by letting him live in our house, in our rental property, the one we'd sunk so much of our savings into, the one that was supposed to be our future. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. Ethan looked at me, then back to Sarah, a slow smile spreading across his face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that said, "I know something you don't." "Helping out," he repeated, the words dripping with sarcasm. He turned back to Sarah. "Yeah, she's been a real lifesaver, Mark. Couldn't have done it without her, especially with the rent situation." Rent situation? What rent situation? I thought the tenants in the front paid on time. That was Sarah's proud claim. No issues, she'd said. So who was this guy paying rent to? And why was she the one helping him out? My mind started to race, piecing together fragments of conversations, odd behaviors, late nights, the side hustle. The spreadsheets, the vague talk of investments. It wasn't an investment. It was an expense, her expense. And he was the recipient of her generosity. Or, more accurately, her obsession.
She took a step towards me, her hands reaching out again. "Mark, please, it's not what you think. It's complicated." "Complicated?" My voice cracked. "Complicated is seeing my wife laughing with another man in a bedroom of my property that I didn't know he was living in. Complicated is finding out she's been funneling money into his music career without my knowledge. Complicated is that red Subaru sitting out there like it belongs here." Ethan looked at his car, then back at me, a flicker of unease finally crossing his face. "Hey man, don't bring my car into this." "Oh, I'm bringing your car into this," I spat, my carefully constructed calm shattering. "I'm bringing your entire existence into this. You're living in my house with my wife, and you think you can just waltz in here and talk about your career like it's a goddamn fairy tale?" Sarah stepped between us, her body rigid. "Mark, stop it. You're not being fair." "Not being fair?" I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You know what's not fair, Sarah? The fact that I've been busting my ass to make ends meet, thinking we were a team, while you've been here playing fairy godmother to some gutter musician." The words were out before I could stop them, sharp and cruel. Ethan's face darkened. "Gutter musician? You think you're better than me?" "I think I'm the husband," I roared, the sound echoing in the small room. I think I'm the one who pays the mortgage, who fixed the leaky faucet, who changed the damn oil in your car for 12 years. And you? I pointed at him. You're some parasite who's sucking my wife dry. He took a step towards me, his fists clenching. Sarah screamed, "Ethan, no!" Before I could even react, Sarah shoved Ethan back, then turned to me, her face a mask of desperation and a fury I'd never seen directed at me before. "How dare you? How dare you speak to him like that? He's a struggling artist, Mark. He's talented and passionate, and he's trying to make something of himself, something you clearly never understood or supported." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Struggling artist, talented, passionate. Was she talking about him, or was she talking about me? Had I become that person? The one who didn't understand, who didn't support? The man who was too busy with his own work, his own stresses, to notice his wife's unhappiness, her desperation, her need for something more? "I don't understand," I choked out, the rage draining away, replaced by a crushing wave of confusion and pain. "You think I don't understand? Sarah, you've been lying to me for months. You've been keeping secrets, spending our money, letting another man live in our house. How much more is there to understand?" Her face crumbled. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but there was still that hard edge in her eyes. "There's more, Mark. A lot more. And you deserve to know. You deserve to know why I felt like I had to do this." She took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering.
Ethan isn't just some musician I'm helping out. He's the reason I still feel alive. The air in the room turned frigid. The words hung between us, sharp and deadly. The reason she still felt alive. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about a crush or an investment. This was about something far deeper, far more dangerous. Ethan, who had been standing by the door, looking increasingly uncomfortable, now stepped forward again. He placed a hand on Sarah's arm. "Sarah, maybe this isn't the time." She shrugged his hand off, her focus entirely on me. "No, Ethan, this is exactly the time. He needs to know. We've been together for months, Mark. Ever since I started coming to these networking events you were so dismissive of. He's everything I've been missing. He sees me. He hears me. He makes me feel like the woman I used to be. The woman I used to be." The implication was devastating, that I had turned her into someone who didn't feel alive, that she had to seek it elsewhere. And not just elsewhere, but in the arms of another man, in a secret life built on deceit and lies, funded by the very foundations of our shared existence. I stumbled back, my hand reaching out for support, finding only the rough plaster of the wall. My vision blurred. The room seemed to tilt. I looked at Sarah, her face streaked with tears, her expression a mixture of pain, guilt, and a terrifying kind of liberation. I looked at Ethan, his jaw set, his blue eyes watching me with a mixture of pity and challenge. "Months?" I whispered, the word barely audible. "You've been with him for months?" She nodded, her breath catching in her throat. "Yes, Mark, for months. Months." That explained the late nights, the industry conferences, the subtle shifts in her demeanor, the way she'd sometimes look at me with a wistful, faraway expression. She hadn't been unhappy. She'd been in love with another man, while sharing my bed, while living in my house, while pretending everything was fine. "And the rental property," I said, my voice hollow. "You let him live here, to be with him." She bit her lip, a tiny tremor running through her. "It was convenient, and I wanted to help him. And it gave us a place where we could be us without you knowing." The casualness of her confession, the sheer coldness of it, was almost more than I could bear. A place where we could be us, my rental property, my investment, my home, reduced to a clandestine love nest. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Ethan stepped forward again, his voice softer this time, but no less intrusive. "Mark, look, I know this is messed up, but Sarah, she's unhappy, and I make her happy. That's the bottom line." "The bottom line," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "The bottom line is that you're a homewrecker, and you?" I turned to Sarah, my voice breaking. "You're a traitor." The word felt too small, too inadequate.
for the depth of the betrayal I felt.
She flinched as if I'd struck her. Don't say that, Mark.
Why not? It's the truth, isn't it?
What else would you call it? What do you call this, Sarah? A mutually beneficial arrangement? A modern take on an open marriage? Is that what you've been telling yourself? She dropped her gaze, her shoulders slumping. She didn't deny it. She didn't have an answer. And in that silence, in the small, stuffy bedroom of my rental property, with the faint scent of stale cigarette smoke and cheap cologne mingling with the ghost of our shared past, I knew. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that my marriage, my life, everything I thought I knew had just imploded. I looked at Ethan, at the smug satisfaction in his eyes, and then back at Sarah, at the devastation on her face, and I realized that this wasn't just about cheating. This was about a complete and utter disconnect, a chasm so wide I doubted it could ever be bridged. So, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, "You're saying you love him?" She hesitated, her eyes scanning my face, searching for something, anything. Then, she took another shaky breath and nodded. "Yes, Mark, I love him." The confession hung in the air, a death knell for our 12 years together. I felt a physical ache in my chest, a gaping wound where my heart used to be. Love him. She loved him. My wife loved another man, and she'd been living this double life right under my nose. I turned away, unable to bear the sight of her, of him, of the wreckage of my life spread out before me. I walked out of the bedroom, the faint indie rock music seeming to mock me. I walked through the empty living room, the silence now deafening, and out the front door. The red Subaru sat there, a bright, garish symbol of her new life. I got into my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. I didn't look back. I just drove. The streets of the familiar suburbs blurred into a smear of lights and shadows. My mind was a chaotic storm of guilt, anger, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I had trusted her, implicitly, and she had shattered that trust into a million irreparable pieces. I drove aimlessly, the radio off, the silence inside the car almost as loud as the storm raging within me. I kept replaying Sarah's words. "He's everything I've been missing. He makes me feel like the woman I used to be. I love him." Each phrase was a fresh stab to the gut. Where did I go from here? How did I even begin to process this? My wife, my rental property, her secret lover. It was too much, too surreal, too devastating. I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of my own making, or rather, her making. I ended up in a diner, the kind with vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that hummed with an insistent buzz. I ordered a black coffee, my hands trembling as I held the warm mug. I just sat there, staring into the dark liquid, my thoughts a tangled mess. I remembered our wedding day, the vows we'd exchanged, the promises we'd made. Had any of it been real? Or had she been playing a role, waiting for her chance to escape? Had I missed the signs? Had I been too caught up in my own life, my own career, to see the unhappiness in her eyes? The guilt gnawed at me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I hadn't been enough. Maybe I'd let the spark die out, let the comfort of routine become stagnation. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. The lies, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of using our property as her personal love nest. A waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a kind smile, refilled my coffee. "Rough night?" she asked, her voice gentle. I managed a weak smile. "You could say that." She nodded, as if she understood more than I was saying. "Some nights are like that. Just gotta keep going, though. One foot in front of the other." One foot in front of the other. Easy for her to say. She didn't have her life dismantled by the woman she loved. She didn't have a secret boyfriend living in her rental property. As I sat there, nursing my coffee, a new thought, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of my despair. If she had been using the rental property as a hideaway, a place to conduct her affair, what else had she been doing? What other secrets was she keeping? The tenants, the ones who lived in the front rooms, had they known? Had they seen anything? Had they been complicit? Or worse, completely unaware of the sordid drama unfolding just doors down? The idea that innocent people might have been living right next to this clandestine relationship, oblivious, sent another wave of nausea through me. And then, a more chilling thought. What if they had known? What if they'd been paid to stay quiet? The implications were dizzying, and I felt a surge of anger, not just at Sarah, but at the sheer complexity and deceit of it all. I paid my bill and walked back out into the night, the diner's warmth fading as I stepped into the cool air. The drive home felt endless, each mile a testament to the distance that had grown between Sarah and me. When I finally pulled into our driveway, the house looked dark and silent, a stark contrast to the drama that had unfolded just hours before. I let myself in, the familiar click of the lock echoing in the emptiness. I stood in the living room, the same room where I'd once dreamed of fixing the leaning shed, and felt a profound sense of desolation. It wasn't just the house that was broken. It was us. It was everything. I walked to the window and stared out at the dark suburban street, my reflection a pale, defeated ghost. The betrayal wasn't just a crack. It was a sinkhole, and I was still falling. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was the gnawing question that had lodged itself in my mind, a question that felt like a betrayal in itself. Had I even truly known the woman I was married to? Or had she been a stranger all along, expertly playing the part of the wife, while harboring a secret life I was never meant to discover?
The thought was a torment, a constant agonizing hum beneath the surface of my shattered reality. And the image of Ethan, standing there, so confident, so present, kept flashing in my mind, a constant reminder of everything I had lost, and everything I might never have truly possessed. I ran a hand over my face, the stubble rough against my skin. I was exhausted, devastated, and I had no idea what to do next. The silence of the house was a heavy blanket, suffocating me. I felt a desperate urge to just scream, to shatter the quiet with the sheer force of my pain. But no sound came, just the hollow echo of her confession, hanging in the air like poison. I closed my eyes, the image of her tear-streaked face, her whispered, "I love him," seared into my memory. And then another thought, sharper than any of the others, cut through the darkness. If she was this unhappy, if she needed Ethan to feel alive, what did that mean for me? Had I become so irrelevant, so invisible, that she had to seek validation from a stranger? The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. I opened my eyes again, staring out into the darkness. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows. The house felt haunted, haunted by the ghost of our marriage, and by the ghost of the man I thought I was. And then, in the deepest, darkest recesses of my mind, a question began to form. A question that felt both terrifying and strangely liberating. If she had been living a lie, was it possible that I had too? Had I been so caught up in the narrative of our perfect suburban life that I had missed the real story unfolding right beside me? The thought was a dizzying precipice, and I felt myself teetering on the edge. The next morning, the sun would rise, and I would have to face this new reality. But tonight, in the suffocating darkness of my home, all I could do was stare into the void, wondering if there was any way out, or if I was destined to be consumed by the darkness I had unknowingly allowed to fester. The rental property, that had been the catalyst, but the rot, I was beginning to suspect, had set in much, much deeper. And the question of what exactly she had been investing in, beyond his music, beyond his career, was a dark, unsettling mystery that I was only just beginning to unravel. The sheer financial scale of it also began to dawn on me.
This wasn't just about a few demo tapes. This was a sustained investment. How much money had she really been spending? And from where? The side hustle felt increasingly like a smokescreen, a carefully crafted illusion to mask a much larger and much more personal financial undertaking. And the tenants? Those innocent bystanders? What if they had been hearing things? What if they had seen Ethan coming and going? Had Sarah coached them, bribed them, or simply hoped they'd turn a blind eye? The thought of them being caught in the middle of this mess made me feel even worse.
I had created this, in a way, by trusting her implicitly, by letting her manage everything. And now, the consequences were rippling outwards, affecting not just me, but potentially others. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window, the faint scent of Sarah's perfume still lingering in the air, a phantom reminder of a life that was rapidly disintegrating. The betrayal was like a physical weight, pressing down on me, stealing my breath. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the memories, the images, the unbearable weight of it all. But they were relentless, flashing behind my eyelids, a constant reminder of my own naivete, my own blindness. And as I stood there, alone in the quiet darkness, a single chilling thought echoed in the vast emptiness of my mind. How much of this was my fault? How much of this had I allowed to happen? The question was a torment, a relentless accusation that I couldn't answer. And as the first faint hint of dawn began to creep across the horizon, painting the sky in muted shades of gray and pink, I knew one thing for certain. My life would never be the same again. The comfort of the familiar had been ripped away, leaving me exposed, vulnerable, and utterly alone with the devastating consequences of my wife's secret life. The rental property, once a symbol of our shared ambition, had become a monument to our downfall. And the man living in it, a symbol of everything I was not and everything I had failed to be. The silence in the house was a deafening roar, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall a hammer blow against my already shattered sanity. I walked through the living room, the space we'd meticulously decorated, the space where we'd hosted countless dinner parties, now feeling alien, hollowed out. The familiar scent of lemon polish and Sarah's lavender potpourri was a cruel mockery of the stench of deception that now permeated the air. I found myself in the kitchen, staring blankly at the pristine granite countertops, the same ones we'd debated for weeks before finally settling on. It was all so damn normal. And that's what made it so unbearable. The normalcy of it all, juxtaposed against the utter annihilation of my world. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand still shaking, and leaned against the counter. I thought of the rental property. That goddamn rental property. It had been our dream, a step up, a tangible piece of our future. And now it was a stage for her infidelity, a place where she conducted her secret life with him, Ethan. The name tasted like bile in my mouth. The guy who looked like he'd slept in a ditch, the guy whose arrogance had been almost comical until it wasn't. Until it was a shield, a bravado to cover the fact that he was living off my wife, off my hard work, off our shared life. How much money had she given him? How much had she invested? The word felt like a joke, a cruel twist of the knife. Her investment was a betrayal. Her passion for his music was a testament to her dissatisfaction with me, with us, and she'd kept it all from me. Months of lies, months of sneaking around, months of her acting like everything was fine while she was building a secret life, a life with another man. I remembered the arguments we'd had about money, the careful budgeting, the sacrifices we'd made to afford that rental property. She'd been the one who'd pushed for it, who talked about its potential, about how it would secure our future. And all along, she'd been planning to use it as a love nest. My blood ran cold. The sheer calculated coldness of it was staggering. I thought of the tenants, the couple in the front unit, Had they known? Had they heard things? Had Sarah ever mentioned Ethan to them, or had she kept him completely hidden? The idea of them living their lives, oblivious to the sordid drama unfolding just a few doors down, was almost as unsettling as the thought that they might have been aware, complicit. Had she asked them to keep quiet? Had she bribed them with a rent reduction? My mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. This wasn't just about Sarah and Ethan anymore. It was a tangled web of deceit that I was only just beginning to see the full extent of. I walked back into the living room and sank onto the sofa, the plush cushions offering no comfort. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over Sarah's contact. What would I say? Hey, just found out you're having an affair with the musician living in our rental property? It was too surreal, too absurd to even begin to articulate. I scrolled through our photos, us at the beach, our honeymoon, us at that awful Christmas party for my company, forcing smiles, us at a local fair, Sarah laughing, her eyes bright. Where had that woman gone? The woman I'd married, the woman I'd built a life with. Had she ever truly been there? Or had I been too blinded by love, by routine, to see the cracks forming beneath the surface? The guilt was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Had I been too focused on work? Had I become complacent? Had I stopped seeing her, truly seeing her, and instead just seen the familiar outline of the woman who shared my life? The thought that I might have somehow contributed to this, that my own shortcomings might have pushed her into the arms of another man, was almost as devastating as the betrayal itself. But even if that were true, it didn't excuse the lies, the secrecy, the calculated deception. I thought of Ethan again, his smug confidence, his blatant disregard for me. He treated me like an intruder, like an inconvenience, and Sarah had let him. She'd stood there, her eyes darting between us, her explanation weak, her justifications flimsy. He's the musician I was telling you about. I'm helping him out. The casualness with which she'd spun her lies, even in the face of my discovery, was chilling. A wave of anger, hot and visceral, surged through me.
Anger at Ethan for his audacity, his entitlement. Anger at Sarah for her betrayal, her deceit. And anger at myself for being so blind, so trusting. I wanted to lash out, to smash something, to scream until the neighbors called the police. But I was paralyzed, caught in the wreckage of my own life. I remembered the way Ethan had smirked when I'd asked who the hell he was. It was the smirk of someone who knew he had the upper hand, someone who knew he was getting away with something. And he was. He was getting away with living in my house, with my wife, with the fruits of my labor. And Sarah, my wife, the woman I'd envisioned growing old with, the woman I'd shared my deepest secrets with, my hopes, my fears. She had systematically dismantled all of it, piece by painstaking piece, and replaced it with a lie. A lie that involved another man, a lie that involved our shared property, a lie that involved her emotional and financial investment in his career. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows. My reflection stared back at me, a pale, gaunt stranger. Was this really happening? Was this my life now? A story of betrayal and heartbreak played out in the sterile emptiness of our home? I thought about the future. What did it look like now? Divorce? Lawyers? Dividing up our assets? The rental property? That had to be part of the equation. Would she try to keep it? Would she try to use her sordid affair as some kind of leverage? The thought was sickening. I walked back to the sofa, my legs heavy with exhaustion. I didn't want to think about the legalities, the logistics. I just wanted to understand why. Why had she done this? Why wasn't I enough? Why had she felt the need to seek solace, to feel alive with another man? Had our marriage truly become that hollow, that devoid of passion and connection? The confession she'd made, her declaration of love for Ethan, had been the final blow. It wasn't just a momentary lapse, a mistake. It was a choice, a profound,
soul-shattering choice to love someone else, and that choice had irrevocably severed the ties that bound us. I thought about the money, the sheer amount she must have spent, her side hustle. I'd always assumed it was her way of contributing to our savings, of having a little extra for herself. Now, I realized it was likely her secret war chest, funding her affair, funding Ethan's dreams. The thought of her meticulously planning, calculating, lying about every penny, while I was busy working my ass off, felt like a punch to the gut. And the rental property itself, it wasn't just a house, it was an investment, a symbol of our shared ambition. And she had turned it into a sanctuary for her affair, a place where she could escape me, escape the mundane reality of our marriage, and live out her fantasy with Ethan. The betrayal was so profound, so multifaceted. It felt like I was drowning in it.
I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images, the memories, the raw, bleeding wound of my heart. I felt utterly alone. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd trusted implicitly, had become a stranger. A stranger who had systematically dismantled my life, leaving me with nothing but ashes and a gnawing sense of disbelief. How could I ever trust again? How could I ever look at another woman, another relationship, without the specter of Sarah and Ethan haunting my every step? The damage was too deep, the wound too raw. I stood up again, a strange, numb resolve settling over me. I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. I needed space. I needed to breathe. I grabbed my keys and my wallet, my movements mechanical. As I reached for the front door, I glanced back at the living room, the silent witness to our shattered life. It was no longer a sanctuary, but a tomb. I stepped out into the cool night air, the darkness a welcome shroud. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to drive, to put distance between myself and the wreckage. The red Subaru was gone. A small mercy, I supposed. But the emptiness it left behind was vast, a gaping chasm where my life used to be. As I pulled out of the driveway, the house receding in my rearview mirror, I felt a profound sense of loss, of grief that was almost unbearable. But beneath the pain, a faint flicker of something else began to stir. Not hope, not yet, but a grim determination. I had been betrayed. I had been lied to. My life had been turned upside down, but I was still standing, and I would find a way to rebuild, to pick up the pieces, however shattered they might be, and somehow, some way, to move forward. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but for the first time since I'd walked into that bedroom, I felt a sliver of agency. This was my life, and I would not let it be defined by her betrayal. The rental property was just a building. Our marriage, it turned out, was a lie, and the only thing left was the brutal, unflinching truth, and I was finally ready to face it, no matter how much it hurt. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound, a steady rhythm in the vast expanse of my broken world. I just drove, the lights of the city stretching out before me, a beacon of possibility in the overwhelming darkness, and with every mile, the ache in my chest began to subside, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I was free. Free from the lies, free from the deception, free from the woman who had pretended to be my wife. The freedom was terrifying, exhilarating, and deeply, profoundly sad. But it was mine, and in that moment, driving alone into the unknown, it was the only thing I had left. The concept of investment in his music felt like the ultimate insult. It wasn't just money she was pouring into him, it was her time, her energy, her belief, things I had perhaps taken for granted or failed to nurture. And now, the fruits of that investment were sitting in my bedroom, laughing with my wife. The sheer audacity of it, the casual disrespect, was almost too much to comprehend. I drove for hours, the landscape outside blurring into an indistinguishable montage of headlights and taillights. My mind replayed every word, every glance, every nuance of the confrontation. Sarah's tears, her defiance, her confession of love for Ethan. It was all etched into my memory, a brutal, unforgiving tableau. I thought of the tenants again, the innocent bystanders, the sheer unfairness of them being caught in the crosshairs of our imploded marriage. Had Sarah ever considered their peace of mind? Or was their comfort entirely secondary to her clandestine arrangement? The thought of their potential discomfort, their unknowing proximity to such deception, was a new layer of pain. It was like a stain that spread, contaminating everything it touched. And the rental property itself, our supposed stepping stone to a secure future, had become the very symbol of its destruction. It was a physical manifestation of the rot that had set in, a tangible reminder of her betrayal. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, I could barely breathe. I finally pulled over to the side of the road, the engine idling softly. The sky was beginning to lighten, a pale, bruised purple. Dawn was breaking. A new day. But for me, it was the dawn of a new, solitary existence. The life I had known, the life I had built, was gone. And all that remained was the hollow echo of her whispered confession and the chilling realization that the woman I married had been a stranger all along, hiding in plain sight, waiting for her moment to break free. The questions would linger, of course. What had she truly seen in Ethan? What had I lacked? Had I become so absorbed in my own pursuits that I had neglected the emotional landscape of our marriage? These were questions I would have to grapple with, perhaps for the rest of my life. But right now, in this moment, all I felt was the crushing weight of her betrayal and the terrifying expanse of my newfound aloneness. The rental property, it was just a house that had been tainted, defiled, and rendered a monument to our shared downfall. And as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the haze, I knew one thing for sure. I would never be able to set foot in that house again without seeing his face, her face, and the ghost of the life we had lost. The future stretched before me, a vast, uncharted territory. I had no map, no compass, only the raw, undeniable truth of what had happened. And it was a truth that would shape me, for better or for worse, for all the days to come. The finality of it all was a heavy cloak, but also, strangely, a liberation. The charade was over, the pretense had been shattered, and now there was only the stark, unvarnished reality. And that, I suspected, was going to be a long, arduous journey. But it would be mine, and that, at least, was something.
The car engine sputtered and died as I turned the key, plunging the interior into a profound silence that mirrored the emptiness within me. The dawn was breaking, but the light felt cold, alien. I was adrift, a solitary vessel on a sea of shattered dreams. The weight of it all was immense, a physical burden that pressed down on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. The rental property, the musician, the betrayal. It was a toxic cocktail that had poisoned every corner of my life. And now, I had to find a way to detoxify, to cleanse myself of the lingering remnants of Sarah's deceit. The thought of facing her again, of confronting the full ramifications of this disaster, was almost too much to bear. But I knew I would have to. There was no escaping it. The story wasn't over. It had just entered its most devastating act, and I was the unwilling protagonist in a tragedy of my own unwitting creation. I closed my eyes. The image of Ethan's smug face and Sarah's tear-streaked confession seared into my mind. And as the sun finally crested the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, I knew that the dawn brought no relief, only the stark, undeniable beginning of a new, lonelier chapter.